I'm speaking today as both a representative of the Bloomington Normal Democratic Socialists of America, as well as my own experience with utility shutoffs as a property manager and a customer of Ameren. On March 29th, the eviction moratorium was extended. However, this moratorium will not protect renters who are being evicted due to utility shutoffs. This is a direct quote from the order. Nothing in this order precludes evictions based on a tenant, leasee, or resident violating any other contractual obligation other than the timely payment of rent. While I was a property manager at a very large multi-unit housing complex in Bloomington, we evicted people for having their utilities shut off. It was in the lease that if we got notice that utilities were reverted back to the landlord or were shut off at the unit, we would immediately send out a notice to comply or be evicted. This was not an empty threat in the lease. We did evict people, and the judges in McLean County upheld these evictions, just as I imagine they will again, even now in the midst of the pandemic, because of the language in the moratorium extension order. McLean County's emergency housing infrastructure is severely underfunded. Our shelter capacity, like all the rest in the state, has dropped dramatically due to COVID mitigations. Emergency state and federal funding has been exhausted at many agencies, and there are entanglements and bureaucracy often seen in getting funds from local governments into the hands of the nonprofits that are providing housing services. A new wave of evictions due to utility shutoffs, as well as people having to voluntarily move out of their homes, will not be cushioned by our social service programs in McLean County. People with evictions on their record won't be able to find new landlords or have options to purchase. The moratorium on utility shutoffs must be extended until municipalities have a better grasp of direct aid. In Bloomington, our direct aid applications are piled up with more than 200 people waiting for their applications to be processed, and the number of people who have applied versus the number of people we know need help has been astonishingly low. People do not realize what aid is available, and the application processes are long and confusing with a lot of hoops to jump through. People are being denied or not giving enough help and feeling helpless and hopeless. Even people that qualify for LAHEAP may not get enough help to prevent a shutoff. I myself applied for help and was only given a $200 one-time grant to apply to an Ameren bill that had climbed to over $700 when schools were shut down and I had no daycare options for my severely disabled son. Ameren wanted $575 to reinstate my payment arrangement. I didn't have it and was set a disconnect warning a few weeks ago. Please extend the utility moratorium and give municipalities time to get a better grasp on direct aid processes and decide how to divvy up the direct aid they are receiving from the federal government. In Bloomington, these conversations are just now beginning. Please give us more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, hi, my name is Beau Barber. I am a Champaign County Democratic Precinct Committee person. I am also a PhD student in engineering at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So I know about what the education involved is like for engineering. You know, every engineer is told at least once in their training or their learning, if not numerous times, if your calculations for some design are off or you did not consider something important, people will die. You're told, every engineer is told this at least once. And that is why ethical and professional engineers always consider, you know, a safety factor or take some kind of risk mitigation strategies. And what I see in the current reopening plan, I don't see reasonable risk mitigation strategies brought into this. The mean tested measures include, you know, just the mean tested measures included do not sufficiently account for the rising number of cases like we saw last fall. We're seeing a similar trend. While at the same time, only just over 1 in 3 people vaccinated over the age of, there's only 1 in 3 people over the age of 16 who have been vaccinated at this point. And I'm literally sitting in the parking lot of my public health department about to get my second shot. And I only got getting my second shot this early because I have underlying health conditions. The rest of the state, for the most part, 16 years and older, won't have access to even their first dose until April 12th. That's a little under 2 weeks from now. And it's because of this and because of what I saw in news on Tuesday that made it more apparent to me that, you know, reasonable risk mitigation strategies were not considered in this reopening plan. So what I'm referencing is ABC7's news article from Tuesday titled Illinois Utilities Shutoff Moratorium End Wednesday, How to Get Help Paying Bills by Leah Hope, where the chair, respectfully, says it's important to note the bill payment assistance program is a finite fund, so it runs out, so call soon. This indicates to me that you knew the consequences of what would happen if you went forward with this reopening plan, knowing there was not enough resources at this current moment to handle what, trauma, hardship, and even deaths that are going to come because of this reopening plan that you voted to allow shutoffs to resume. And you voted yes anyways. And so, clearly there was not a legitimate ethical consideration brought into this. And, to me, that means that this moratorium needs extending, this plan needs reevaluated, otherwise people will die, and that's not a debatable fact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Almost 1 year ago today, George Floyd was killed by the police officer Derek Chauvin. This instigated waves of protests against police violence and waves of police violence, both of which are still ongoing. The governments of the city of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, and Minnesota State all had opportunities to prevent this instability that resulted from this action, but refused to act until that instability became impossible to ignore, both politically and generally. And by then, that instability was too late to stop. It should be understood that the refusal of these governments to act was not necessarily malfeasant. Politics is a complicated and difficult process at the best of times, and as a result, most politicians default to the path of least resistance. More often than not, that path is to do what was already being done, as is the case with the moratorium on utility shutoffs. I do not assume that the people of this commission are ghouls that delight in the suffering of the poor. I assume that the people of this commission are unelected bureaucrats put in place to ensure the status quo. The moratorium on utility shutoffs is set to expire, and it is simply easier to allow that to happen. But it needs to be understood that this would cause a great deal of instability in this community, not just for all the reasons that every other person has mentioned and will mention, but because all these things compound and multiply one another. This country, the entire country, is in a state of wide-scale political instability due to decades of intermittent malfeasance and inaction by federal and state governments. Regular people despise the people who run this country, whether those people be Democrats or Republicans. More worryingly, the government seems to have nothing but contempt for their people. I and 3 others were thrown out of a press conference last Wednesday before we had a chance to ask about these shutoffs. And there are reasons outside of the control of this council and anyone in this state that things are very soon going to become more unstable. Choosing to create more instability, to compound that instability in such a serious way as you are planning on doing, in such a way that we know would spike cases of COVID, would spike hospitalizations, is irresponsible and an abandonment of the public good. Or, put another way, extending the moratorium on eviction shutoffs would work to ensure the safety and health of this community, and would stabilize the community in unsafe times. The community has this commission has a responsibility to act in the public good, and consequently to extend the moratorium on utility shutoffs. I do not believe this commission will act on this responsibility. That is not what you were appointed to do. But you have a chance to. Exceptional circumstances call for exceptional measures, and we are, unfortunately, living through exceptional circumstances. I would add, since I have the time, that threatening the well-being of the community because some companies stand to maybe lose some profit is exactly the reason former President Trump stated for not acting on the coronavirus until it too was too late to stop. I thank the council for their time.
Thank you.
I'm here representing the CU Human Rights Coalition. When I spoke here last, I mentioned some of the ways in which this decision that you so quickly came to would be disastrous. Today, I plan to go a little bit more in depth about that. So the poverty rate as it stands now, numbers of 2020 show that we have well over 1 million people who fall under that poverty rate. As a matter of fact, going along with that and kind of, going over that, in the last quarter of 2020, it was reported that 31% of all households in Illinois were at risk for evictions. I mean, granted, some things have changed. Not too many things have changed. A COVID spike has came about, the CDC decided to up those protections. Rightfully so. But within those numbers, there's something that's particularly telling. That when you look at the people who are in the poverty line or under it, a good percentage of those people are people of color. And in this year, and as 2020 has been, in the wake of George Floyd's murderer being on trial, we find that racial relations have been at the forefront of our society, and is, again, the same case today. What my hope is that you take a stand today. That is just as the good book I always preached, to be a good neighbor. But maybe it's too late for that. Because without consideration of all of the facts and all of the things that were told to you in the last meeting, you callously decided that profit was worth more than people. This is something that won't be forgotten. And I'm not particularly sure how would one sleep at night knowing this. As a matter of fact, I'm running on fumes right now because it's been hard for me to sleep when I think about the amount of people that are going to get sick, that are going to die, the crime that it links to this. It's a shameful, shameful situation.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. That's your time.
I am speaking as a representative of the Champaign-Urbana Democratic Socialists of America. I am here to once again ask that you extend the moratorium on utilities and prevent any more utility shutoffs. I understand that there are programs such as LIHEAP and H2O Help, but if you look at the data, last year in the fiscal year of 2020, there were 70,000 less households that received LIHEAP relative to the previous year, fiscal year in 2019, despite the increased need to the pandemic's economic impact. Some of these protections that were adopted in September 22nd, in terms of the LIHEAP, where people were told that if they needed help with their, it was hard to explain why people should apply for LIHEAP when they needed help with their water bill. And unfortunately, there's been a lack of information, a lack of transparency, and a lot of people are having trouble right now finding the right information and finding the right aid to apply for. As I said in the last meeting, I spoke to a young mother. This was a young mother with a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. Her water company told her that she needed to pay her water bill, and you know, she fell behind because of the pandemic, and she eventually ended up with having to call the Salvation Army, which maybe offered her a few $100s. What I find, you know, in this past year, what I find so frustrating and so disheartening is that there seems to be just a lack of accountability from anyone who wants, and a lack of compassion. You know, I know there's a mother, or a woman, I believe she is a mother too, in Carbondale, who was told by the water department that her browser was out of date, and that when she tried to pay her bill, there was nothing they could do. So this was a woman who, to add insult to injury, was a Native American woman who was sitting in her house. She was dealing with COVID, and it seemed that nobody wanted to take any accountability, any responsibility. You know, it's hard to believe that in 2010, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution affirming that water is a human right. clean drinking water is a human right. But here in the United States of America, it's a commodity. You know,
Thank you, Mr. Theobald.
so thank you very much. Yeah, I thank you.
You may proceed, Mr. Dawson.
So today I wanted to come here. I appreciate the time. I appreciate having this venue to speak. And I wanted to hit on Ameren specifically, because not only that's personal for me, that's my provider, and this is a personal issue. And so without being too boring, statistics, Ameren put all these statements out on their own website, and so they can be fact checked. In Q1 of 2020, they saw a 36% increase in profit. Q2, their shares went from 72 cents in 2019 to 98 cents. Q3, they stayed $1.47 compared to both years. And then Q4, they ended at $3.50 a share from $3.35. So mainly what I want to bring to the table here is who are the ones that are struggling and who are the ones that are having record profits. And the decision that has been made, who is that benefiting? And that's really a rhetorical question, because I think anybody out there knows the answer to who this is benefiting right now. And unfortunately, it is not the citizens of Illinois, and it is not the people. And so the citizens only received $3,200 or $9.80 a day in 2020. So that's what we have. And then we have a company who is having record profits. And so $10 a day versus record profits. Again, what has this decision been, who has this decision been made for, and who is it to benefit? Again, rhetorical question, because the answer is obvious. My main question is, why are we focusing on profits over people? Why do we see money being more important than someone's well-being or their health? And so you can't live a normal life without utilities. You have to have that. And so by taking that away, it's just one more thing that is being added to the citizens of Illinois' list of things that they have to overcome. Basically, I want to ask, have a heart, and make a decision that isn't just bottom line based. I ask you to be understanding and think outside of the bubble of these meetings. Do what's right. I ask you to do what's right, because I think every person listening to me right now knows what the right decision is. And I think that it's important to lead us in a way that you show us that you care. Because at this point, I don't think, or I get the vibe that, it doesn't matter. Bottom line matters. Ameren's profit matters. Profit over people, profit over people. These are kind of rhetorical questions, because the answers are obvious. I think we both know, everyone knows on this call how that is. And so thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I am here today representing Progressives of Pekin, Illinois. So what I'm here today to say is water is extremely important to public health initiatives. Even with protections in place, there have been over 10,000 water disconnections in Illinois since October. Cities in Illinois that have prohibited water shutoffs have resumed, but we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and yet this public body voted to allow utility shutoffs to resume, including water shutoffs, which will make these much worse, and without relief for the families currently behind on their utility bills in place. Once these resume, people will be unable to practice an essential public health action in their homes, one that is not only essential for the prevention of the spread of COVID-19, but also for things like chronic diarrhea and hepatitis A. People will be unable to wash their hands. By ending the utility shutoffs, you're going to worsen the health of regular people. Things like shigellosis, acute dysentery, giardiasis, as well as Campylobacter infections, which affect the intestines, were seen in places like Michigan when they resumed utility shutoffs. People need relief from this pandemic, not another health concern to worry about, especially when employers are requiring their employees to take 2 weeks off to quarantine, even with a negative COVID test at the first sign of any symptoms of being sick. People are afraid, but people need immediate utility bill relief, not means-tested policies that force them to jump through 7 layers of bureaucracy to receive a measly % of what they're being charged by these utility companies. Do not put profits of a few utility companies execs before public health. Please do the right thing and reinstate the moratorium on utility shutoffs. There's clear evidence that when people go without water, they get sick and they die. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for your time. I'm representing the Party for Socialism and Liberation in Champaign-Urbana, and I'm here to ask that the ICC extend the moratorium on utility shutoffs until the pandemic is under control for everyone and people can resume their lives normally. I'm going to talk about Illinois American Water. Let me read their posted increases in profits per share from 2019 to 2020. Second quarter, at the peak of Illinois' unemployment crisis, 3.2%. Third quarter, 2019 to 2020, 9.8%. Fourth quarter 2019 to 2020, fully including the start of water shutoffs in Illinois, 48%. If these companies were losing money, that would be one thing. The state could negotiate a bailout or pursue other options. Denying people access to their basic needs is not just unnecessary, it's cruel. But Illinois American Water and these other corporations are not losing money or breaking even. They're profiting, and their profits are growing. It's obvious that they care more about their individual gain than the well-being of real people, real families here in this state. Throughout the pandemic, people have lost their lives, their good health, and their jobs. As of this morning, Illinois has had 1.25 million cases and over 23,000 deaths. At the same time, since September 2020, over 87,000 households have had either their power or their water shut off. Those most affected are working class families who don't have a backup or any substantial savings. At such a critical period, corporations who are profiting this much should not be looking to profit even more. Is facing COVID not enough? Do these families also have to worry about not having running water or keeping the lights on? By allowing shutoffs to happen, the state government is endorsing this behavior and is responsible for the suffering of those affected. It is unacceptable for an institution that claims to represent the needs of its people to allow this to happen. The fact that several of us from different organizations spanning the state are here in solidarity with the people of Illinois, while politicians and executives stuff their pockets, should say everything there is to say about the situation we're in. Once again, I'm asking the Illinois Commerce Commission to extend the moratorium on utility shutoffs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Paganini.
I would like to start by thanking the commissioners for the opportunity to speak on this important issue. I've been the executive director of Jacksonville Unite for just over 12 years. We are a community organization that assists people with the issues regarding homelessness, hunger, poverty, and disenfranchisement. We mainly operate in Morgan County, Illinois, although with issues like this, we tend to reach out on state level issues that affect us here in Morgan County. As a nonprofit, I can tell you in speaking with other executive directors and board members of other nonprofits in our communities, like United Way, like Boys and Girls Club, Big Brother, Big Sister, et cetera. Nonprofits and community organizations simply cannot continue to absorb these burdens. Many have told me they will have exhausted their funds before the end of 2021, which will ultimately drastically affect the services they can provide to our community that they serve in the years going forward. So not just this year, but in the years coming up. These organizations that help with other things have been having to focus the majority of their time and money and resources on electric bills, utility bills, et cetera. And as I said before, it's just simply not something that we can continue to do. This will drastically affect the communities that they serve in the years going forward, and we cannot afford to absorb these costs anymore. The city of Jacksonville in Morgan County has never abided by the shutoff moratorium for water services and has been shutting people's water off during a pandemic without recourse. In regards to electricity, Ameren payment arrangements are set up so that if you make a payment arrangement and you miss one payment, the entire bill will come due immediately. So while they may not be shut off this month or next month, whatever decision you make today may get them shut off 3-4 months from now when COVID starts to spike. It's already started to spike again. And on a side note, many electric cooperatives like Menard Electric in my area, it's in Petersburg, Illinois, that mainly serve rural areas of the state, have never abided by the moratoriums because they said it doesn't apply to electric cooperatives. And even if every single dollar of available funding were utilized, and even if every single person knew about it, applied for it, and were approved for it, that funding would still not be able to cover the cost of all the past due bills. I urge you to extend the utility shutoff moratorium until a better solution can be resolved and adequately implemented. Thank you for your time and consideration of this matter, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you.
I'm a student at UIUC speaking today on behalf of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Young Democratic Socialists of America. I wish to bring up a rapidly emerging development to the COVID crisis that must be addressed immediately in the form of an extension of utility shutoff moratorium. Folks here may have heard about the B117 strain of the coronavirus, a strain that is more infectious and lethal than what the US has experienced thus far. The strain is expected to be the dominant strain of COVID in the entirety of the United States, according to a press release by the White House just yesterday by CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky. Some of you may have heard about the success of U of I at Urbana-Champaign's testing system. Already, this constant and consistent COVID testing is revealing a trend of more than 50% of new cases on the campus are B117 variants. Most of those cases are coming from those who are outside of Champaign-Urbana, coming into the area from other parts of Illinois. It is a canary in the coal mine as to what Illinois will be facing, as reported by Joe Maher of the Chicago Tribune. As of yesterday, the 31st of March, the public health administrator of Champaign County, Julie Pride, reported that 50% of all local cases in the county are of the B117 variant. This is information that is more current than the last update of the Illinois Department of Health website on COVID variants on the 30th of March. The resurgence of this crisis in Illinois will only intensify faster than we think. I beg the Commission to understand the severity of the situation and take the appropriate action before it is too late. Illinois must extend the utility shutoff moratorium, and to not do so is to condemn thousands more to die. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm speaking today as a student at Illinois State University and as a member of the Peoria Democratic Socialists of America. Today could be considered a turning point regarding utility shutoffs. As a student at Illinois State University, I know the struggles that many students have had during these semesters in the pandemic. Large amounts of people who have been unemployed, evicted, have had utility shut off all over the state is staggering, to say the least. I don't understand why this is even a debate at this point. Students as well as parents have said that, I mean, they have to think about enough already, right? Like during a regular semester alone, not to mention during a pandemic. Finances are among the most important issues that they have to deal with on a semester to semester basis. Do you even understand what students, teachers, faculty, and family members have had to deal with during this pandemic? Postponing the shutoffs utilities would be so beneficial and relieve stress for so many. I personally am a lower income student, so I feel like, you know, there are a lot of stipulations with insurance. There's a lot of stipulations with finances during a pandemic when not everyone's able to work, when people are losing their jobs, when people are dying, people are going to the hospital. I don't feel like that this is the right path to go. I really don't see any benefits of this, only a lot more complications and issues with the state of Illinois. And as my comrades have said, this is dangerous. And I hope that you do the right thing, extend the moratorium. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you.
I live in Woodlawn on the south side of Chicago. When I read that utility shutoffs would be resuming this week, I was astounded. The purpose of your commission, as stated on your website, is to protect the public and to ensure that public utility services are adequate, reliable, and safe. That utility shutoffs could resume during a deadly pandemic would be a clear abdication of these duties. The news report that I read about this on ABC7 quoted Chairwoman Zalewski as telling the public that they should negotiate with their utility provider if they fall behind or apply for assistance, stating, "It's important to note the bill payment assistance program is a finite fund, so it runs out soon, so call soon." A finite fund that could run out soon is not an adequate response during a public health crisis. Means-tested aid that relies on income level and other qualifying factors is not an adequate response during a public health crisis. The moratorium must continue. And I was looking into this issue. I found another news report from September of last year in which Chairwoman Zalewski stated that, quote, "Illinois citizens are facing extraordinary challenges due to the pandemic. Low-income families and those impacted by COVID-19 should not have to fear losing basic services like electric, heat, or fresh water." I wonder what has changed between September and now. Why is it now acceptable for low-income families and those impacted by this virus to fear losing basic services? Why is that fear okay now? We're experiencing an uptick in COVID cases here in Chicago. Why is the idea of endangering people acceptable right now? Perhaps it's not that the morality of this issue has changed, but that the utility companies, which still amass huge profit throughout all of this, are fed up with any threat to their bottom line. I should not have to beg on behalf of my community and my neighbors for this commission to put our interests above those of these corporations. My neighbors who don't speak English as a first language will struggle to negotiate or apply for assistance. That my neighbors with children who are trying to learn at home to stay safe at home might find themselves in uninhabitable conditions in their own homes is enraging. It cannot be allowed. Extend the utility shutoff moratorium for the health, safety, and dignity of the residents who entrust you with these duties. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan.
Speaking today on part of the Christian County DSA, I'd like to use my time to ask you to continue a moratorium on utility shutoffs for those who cannot pay. Reinstating utility shutoffs is a clear case of putting the profit of a few corporations above the need of human beings. This pandemic has impacted everyone in our society, but has not had a worse impact on anyone more than those already living below the poverty line. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, from February 2020 to February 2021, there was an 11% drop in low-wage jobs. Additionally, 11% of Illinois households report not having enough to eat. This number raises to 17% when you look at households that have children. In a time when so many people are having trouble making ends meet, it is criminal to not provide relief. As others have said, the utility companies have continued making money even as those who have least lose even more. It is unacceptable to me that in the wealthiest country on earth, we are allowing thousands without basic, even in the midst of a global pandemic. I would just
Mr. Stevens, hold on 1 second. So I just took the clock for a second. Mr. Stevens, yeah, I think if you could go back and say the last 3 sentences, Mr. Court Reporter, does that sound right?
That's about right, yeah.
Or maybe, you know what, how about this? Let the Court Reporter say what he last captured, and then you can pick up from there if that's okay.
Okay, that works.
Mr. Court Reporter, do you know what was last said? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was about, you said, in a country like the United States.
It is unacceptable to me that in the wealthiest country on earth, we are allowing thousands to go without basic needs, even in the midst of a global pandemic. I just ask that you please continue the moratorium on utility shutoffs. I yield the.
Okay, I think you were going to say you yield the remainder of your time.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'd like to thank all of you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Melinda Hilker. I'm representing Southern Illinois DSA, but more than anything, I am a low-income earner. I'm a teacher's aide. I'm a current student. I'm a mother, and I'm an advocate for the marginal voices in Illinois. I have always been someone who helps my neighbors, help them get through these life applications, which can be complicated and tiresome, to say the least. I've been there. I've had those experiences where I feared that truck pulling up because, oh my God, could that be the next time that I lose my utilities? Could that be the moment that I have to figure out a whole new plan for my family? Will I be able to cook dinner that night? These fears become overwhelming and paralyzing when you're in these states. And unless you are in it, unless you have felt that desperation, you have no idea what it feels like to not be certain if you will have custody of your children by the end of the month. Because if you get evicted in the state of Illinois, you can lose your children. And that is absolutely a possibility for parents across Illinois right now. As this moratorium is lifted yesterday, we now have people across this state who are gasping for desperation because they are so impacted by so many of these elements that have happened within COVID. Luckily, I'm one of those people that I have computer access. Luckily, I'm one of those people that I didn't get my utilities shut off. Luckily, I'm one of those people that had a savings account. Luckily, I'm one of those privileged. And I'm assuming most of you that are on here are also one of those privileged lucky ones. But luck should not be determining the fate of how we are determining these equations. It should not be that we have to look at, oh, this part of the equation as, well, these companies need to make profit. We need to make sure that we're looking at it through an empathetic, analytical lens, through mathematics and probability. Are people going to lose their utilities? Yes. Are people going to lose their homes? Yes. Can people lose their children? Yes. And I beg all of you to please continue this moratorium and protect the vulnerable people throughout Southern Illinois and Illinois in general. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm the campaign lead of No Ameren Shutoffs, a $0 all-volunteer group of 51 member organizations and counting, spanning the state, north and south, east and west. We aren't here recreationally. And you all know the data, such as within 2 weeks of the September utility shutoffs happening, we had over 2,000 cases a day, which we already have worse than that now. Within 3 weeks, we had over 3,000 cases a day. Within 4 weeks, over 4,000 cases a day. Within a month and 4 days, we were at over 6,000 cases a day, all before Halloween and all before the election. But perhaps that's not enough. Perhaps the story of a single mother in Champaign, separate from the story that Ben Theobald told you, is of note, because we asked her how utility shutoffs affected her, and her answer was simple. I've had to separate and give away my children. On top of the fact that that's grossly inhumane, it is not safe during a pandemic. This can be sourced all the way from the 2007 Congressional Research Service's Pandemic Influenza and Analysis of State Preparedness and Response Plans. And one of the things that's really important to note about this whole situation is that the debt relief is not going to come in mass from simply helping Illinoisans to refinance, which is what your reopen plan amounts to. There is a House bill, HB 2877, that since the last time we spoke to you, passed through the House. And it doesn't have just one state senator sponsoring it, not just 2, not just 3, but 7, including 2 from Central Illinois and the majority whip, that would provide direct payments sourced from the Trump and McConnell administration using federal dollars to rent and utility providers. The utility corporations are going to get their money. But perhaps the decisions made by this body are to keep politicians comfortable. So let's discuss for a moment just how inconvenienced they were last time and what devastating effect this could have on the state of Illinois. Last time, within a week of utility shutoffs happening, the Sangamon County Health District actually showed a huge spike in their COVID cases, a huge spike in their positivity rate. And the Illinois General Assembly was shut down for the fall veto session. If that happens again in the spring legislative session, you are not going to just make it harder for Illinoisans to catch up on their rent and utility debt, but you are going to doom all the other hard-fought pieces of legislation that the politicians who you may be trying to keep comfortable are fighting for too. Please do what's right for the state of Illinois and keep the protections that we once had in place to avoid a repeat of catastrophe that we have seen in Tennessee, that we have seen in Indiana, that we have seen in West Virginia. Don't do it.
Thank you, Mr. Axelrod.
I am a resident of Champaign County, and today I am representing myself. I'm here today to ask the ICC to extend the moratorium on utility shutoffs in all Illinois until the direct effects of the pandemic are sufficiently curtailed and until everyone in the state can resume their lives normally. According to an LA Times article from March 23rd of this year, millions of U.S. households are facing heavy past due utility bills, which have escalated in the year since the COVID-19 pandemic forced Americans hunkered down at home to consume more power. As a result, nearly 1/3 of U.S. households will soon have to reckon with their overdue power bills at a time when many of them are struggling with lost jobs or income. Though the economy has achieved considerable gains in recent months, about 9.5 million jobs remain lost, and many people have lost income even while remaining employed, leaving them unable to buy food, pay rent, or afford utility bills. On top of that, a team of Duke University researchers have found that policies that helped financially struggling Americans stay in their homes and keep access to water and electricity during the COVID-19 pandemic also helped reduce the spread of the virus. Their research found that eviction moratoria and relief from utility disconnections reduced COVID-19 cases by 8.2% from the onset of the pandemic through the end of November 2020. Utility moratoria have varied widely in duration and scope and were often introduced late in the pandemic. The study found that if a utility shutoff moratorium had been enacted on March the 1st of 2020, it would have cut infections by 8.7% and deaths by 14.8%. I believe what we have been talking about today is a deeply moral and ethical issue. I'm thinking about so many people's stories today whenever I say this. We cannot put profit over the Illinois people. Water is a human right. People's physical health, ability to find new housing, and often their literal lives are hanging in the balance right now. Once again, I ask that the statewide utility shutoff moratorium be extended until it is safe for people to live normally again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I am here to, as a member of both the Bloomington Normal and Decatur clubs of the Communist Party. First of all, I want to thank you for not only extending the time for speakers today back to its original state, but for giving back the extra minute so that we have 3 minutes. Sometimes just knowing that you're willing to listen can make a difference in how people view public bodies. Obviously, I'm here to advocate for extending the shutoff moratoriums. Even though there's help available, as I stated last time I spoke here, that it's very difficult to get that help in ideal times, let alone, now. The issue is that a lot of these offices are in remote working right now, which means caseworkers are not at the office with access to everything. This is, by their own admission, has led to a lot of people's calls and follow-up calls being lost. You can't rely on the mail. The United States Postal Service is in a severe decline under the mismanagement of bootlicker Louis DeJoy. And this means that letters are not reaching people. These are recertification letters. These are shutoff notices. These are payment agreement plans that are never arriving because of problems caused by both government mismanagement and the pandemic. So even though you can get help, it's very difficult. And again, sometimes you have to really navigate some labyrinthine bureaucracy to get any help in a perfect time. If you want your water shut off to be turned down, then maybe you have to have applied for LIHEAP, and maybe you didn't know that. Maybe your municipality doesn't know that. So all these things are issues when all we should really be doing is worrying about how to help people get through this pandemic. If you stand idly by while these corporations toy with people's lives, at a certain point you're going to be viewed as complicit. And as we're told over and over again, this is a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. So you have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to prove that you are not, as it was so eloquently stated earlier, ghouls who delight on the torment of the poor. That's not the reputation that I would want. I would want to stand with the people of Illinois, not with these corporations who are already profiting through the roof at the expense of the poor and the working class. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Girdler.